Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a really pivotal period, those 35 years right after the Civil War.
That's 1865 to about 1900.
Yeah, and this is when America just fundamentally transforms. It stops being mainly, farms and small
And
towns.
becomes this industrial giant, almost overnight, it feels like.
You get these huge cities booming, factories everywhere, smokestacks.
And incredible wealth. The first real mega millionaires, your Rockefellers, your Carnegies.
But it's also a time of really sharp divides, right? A huge wealth gap, especially in the North.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you've got intense racial repression and poverty in the South, plus major conflicts out West. It's complex.
So our goal here is to kind of unpack that. We want to look at the core mechanics, the tech, the business figures, how the government reacted or didn't react.
Exactly. Trying to get a quick handle on the cause and effect in this Gilded Age transition, pulling directly from the historical record.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the engine driving all this?
It has to be the railroads, the iron horse, as they called it. Nothing else happens without it. It physically tied the country together.
The sheer scale of the building.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. You said 35,000 miles in 1865?
Yeah, roughly. And by 1900, over 192,000 miles.
Wow, that's more track than all of Europe put together at the time.
It is. America literally wrapped itself in iron rails.
And this wasn't just private companies doing their thing, was it?
Oh, no, not at all. This was way too big, too expensive, too risky for private capital alone.
So the government stepped in.
Big time. Huge federal subsidies.
Yeah.
Congress gave out enormous loans and just massive grants of public land.
How massive are we talking?
An area bigger than Texas, all told. Given away to railroad companies.
And the official reason was?
Military necessity, post office needs.
Yeah.
Connecting the country.
Yeah.
But really, it was arguably the biggest corporate welfare program in U.S. history up to that point.
And the crown jewel of this effort was the Transcontinental Railroad, authorized during the Civil War, 1862.
And finished in 1869. That connection was huge.
Tell us about building it. It sounds like a pretty brutal story.
It really was. You had two main companies racing towards each other. The Union Pacific started in Omaha, Nebraska, pushing west.
And they used mostly Irish immigrants, the Paddies.
That's right. Many were Civil War vets.
Yeah.
Hard, grueling labor across the plains.
And the other company.
The Central Pacific
Mhm.
started in Sacramento, California, heading east. They had the nightmare job of crossing the Sierra Nevada mountains.
And who did they rely on?
Primarily Chinese laborers, about 10,000 of them. They were known for being incredibly efficient, working for very low wages.
And tragically, seen as expendable. The death toll was high.
Very high. But they got it done. The two lines met near Ogden, Utah in 1869.
The famous wetting of the rails with the golden spike ceremony?
Exactly. And the impact was, well, immediate.
How so?
It physically linked the West Coast to the rest of the country, opened up the Great Plains and the West for settlement, mining, agriculture. Huge economic stimulus.
And it led to something we take for granted now. Standard time zones.
Right. It sounds mundane, but think about it. Before the 1880s, every town just set its own local time based on the sun.
Which must have been a complete nightmare for railroad schedules.
Utter chaos. So the major railroad companies couldn't operate like that. They got together and simply decreed standard time zones.
Just like that. The government didn't mandate it.
Nope. November 18th, 1883. 4 standard zones across the continent. Private industry literally changed how Americans experience time just to make the trains run on schedule.
That really speaks volumes about their power.
It does. And with that much power, that much money, that much land, inevitably you get corruption.
Monumental corruption, from the sounds.
Oh, absolutely legendary. You have the Credit Mobilier scandal, for instance.
What was that?
Basically, insiders at the Union Pacific created a fake construction company, Credit Mobilier, and then hired themselves at hugely inflated prices to build the railroads.
So they pocketed taxpayer money and investor funds.
Millions. And they bribed congressmen with stock to keep it quiet. Then you had financiers like Jay Gould mastering stock watering.
Watering stock? What's that?
Inflating the claimed value of a company's assets way beyond its real worth, then selling stock at those inflated prices. Pure manipulation.
And the attitude of these railroad tycoons toward the public, it wasn't exactly customer-friendly.
No kidding. Cornelius Vanderbilt supposedly snapped, "And I got the power," when questioned about the legality of his actions.
And his son, William H. Vanderbilt, the famous quote.
The public be damned. Whether he actually said it exactly like that or not, it certainly captured the attitude of the era for many.
How did they maintain control over pricing and markets?
They used tactics like pools. That's where supposed competitors would secretly agree to divide up business in a region and fix prices.
So no real competition.
Not much.
Yeah.
And they offered secret rebates, basically kickbacks, to big, powerful shippers.
While charging small farmers much higher rates.
Exactly, it squeezed the little guy.
Yeah.
This kind of behavior eventually led to calls for regulation.
But the first big court case actually went against regulation, didn't it? The Wabash case.
That's right. Wabash, St. Louis and Pacific Railroad Company v. Illinois, 1886. The Supreme Court ruled that individual states could not regulate interstate railroad traffic.
Why not?
Because the Constitution gives Congress, not the states, power over interstate commerce. So state laws trying to curb railroad abuses were struck down.
Which basically left the federal government as the only entity that could regulate them.
Precisely. And that ruling pushed Congress to finally act.
Leading to the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887.
Correct. It prohibited rebates and pools, required railroads to publish their rates openly.
And it set up the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, the first federal regulatory agency.
Yes. Now, cynics at the time, even some railroad lawyers, noted it wasn't all bad for the railroads.
How so?
It provided an orderly forum to resolve conflicts, stabilized rates somewhat, maybe prevented cutthroat competition that could hurt them. Some saw it as a way to manage the industry.
So maybe regulatory capture from the start.
You could argue that. But still, historically, it's a landmark. It was the federal government saying, for the first time on a large scale, we need to regulate big business for the public good. A huge shift.
Okay, that sets the stage. Railroads connecting everything. Now, let's talk about the actual stuff being made. The industries themselves.
Right, because by 1894, the U.S. wasn't just catching up, it had become the world's #1 manufacturing nation.
What fueled that leap?
Several things. Abundant capital, both domestic and foreign investment. Incredible natural resources just waiting to be exploited. Think Mesabi range iron ore in Minnesota.
That fed the steel mills?
Exactly. And a huge unified domestic market, thanks to those railroads. Plus, American ingenuity. Key inventions.
Like the telephone.
Alexander Graham Bell, 1876. It revolutionized communication, created whole new industries, new jobs, especially for women as operators, the telephoniacs.
And then there's Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park.
Edison was relentless. His most impactful invention, arguably, was perfecting a commercially viable incandescent light bulb in 1879.
It's easy to underestimate that one. Light bulbs, big deal.
But it was a huge deal. Think about it. It fundamentally changed human habits.
Oh.
Suddenly, work wasn't limited by daylight. Factories could run 247. People stayed up later. Some historians even argue average sleep times decreased. It literally reshaped daily life.
Wow. Okay. So communications, light, but the real backbone of industry was?
Steel. Steel was king in this era. And the key wasn't just finding iron ore. It was finding a way to make lots of high-quality steel cheaply.
And that was the Bessemer process?
Yes, developed independently by William Kelly in the U.S. and Henry Bessemer in Britain. Blowing cold air through molten iron burned off impurities quickly.
Making steel production fast and cheap.
Dramatically so. And that cheap steel built everything: railroads, skyscrapers, bridges, machines.
Enter Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate.
Right. Carnegie wasn't an inventor. He was an organizer. A brilliant businessman who saw the potential of this new steel process.
And he pioneered something called vertical integration. What does that actually mean?
It means controlling every single step of the production process. Carnegie didn't just make steel. He owned the iron mines, owned the ships and railroads to transport the ore, owned the coal fields, owned the steel mills, and controlled the shipping of the final product.
So no middlemen.
Exactly. He cut costs at every stage, improved efficiency, ensured quality control. Total control from raw material to finished good.
That's incredible efficiency. But John D. Rockefeller, the oil baron, took a different approach.
He did. Rockefeller mastered horizontal integration.
Okay, what's that?
Instead of controlling the whole production line, Rockefeller focused on dominating one crucial step: oil refining.
How did he do that?
With his Standard Oil Company, founded in 1870, he used ruthless tactics, price wars, secret rebates from railroads to drive competitors out of business or force them to sell to him.
And he perfected the trust.
Yes. The trust was a legal arrangement where stockholders in various smaller oil companies assigned their stock to the board of directors of Standard Oil.
So Standard Oil controlled all these formerly competing companies.
Effectively, yes. By 1877, Standard Oil controlled something like 95% of all oil refineries in the U.S., near total monopoly on that segment.
So vertical integration is controlling the whole process, top to bottom. Horizontal is controlling one whole layer.
That's a good way to put it. Carnegie, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Rockefeller, across one level.
And then there was J. Pierpont Morgan, the banker.
The ultimate consolidator. Morgan didn't build industries. He financed them and, crucially, reorganized them. His tool was interlocking directorates.
Can't blame that.
Morgan would put officers from his own powerful banking firms onto the boards of directors of supposedly competing companies he financed.
Which ensured they wouldn't really compete. They'd cooperate in ways that benefited Morgan's interests.
Precisely. It eliminated competition through financial control and oversight. He consolidated rivals.
And he's the one who bought out Carnegie, right?
He is. In 1901, Morgan bought Carnegie Steel and all its holdings for over $400 million, an astronomical sum then. United States Steel Corporation, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. The scale was just unprecedented.
Okay, so you have these incredibly powerful figures, these titans controlling vast industries. How did people justify this level of wealth and power?
Well, a couple of major ideas emerged, offering justification. The first, and maybe most influential among the wealthy themselves, was social Darwinism.
Applying Darwin's ideas about evolution to human society.
Kind of, yeah. Theorists like Herbert Spencer in England and William Graham Sumner at Yale argued that millionaires were rich because they were naturally fitter.
Survival of the fittest in the economic jungle.
Exactly. They argued that societal progress depended on letting the fittest rise to the top without interference. Helping the poor actually hindered progress in their view.
Sumner's famous question.
What do social classes owe each other? His answer, absolutely nothing. It was a harsh, laissez-faire philosophy. Let nature take its course.
But there was a counter idea, right, associated with Carnegie himself.
Yes, the gospel of wealth. Carnegie argued that while the wealthy were perhaps fitter, they also had a moral duty.
A duty to do what?
To use their vast fortunes not just for themselves, but for the good of society. They were trustees or stewards of wealth.
So make as much money as you possibly can.
But then give it away philanthropically. Build libraries, universities, concert halls, things that would help the deserving poor help themselves.
And Carnegie practiced what he preached, giving away hundreds of millions.
He did, around $350 million by the time he died. But still, both philosophies, in their own way, argued against government regulation of business.
And regulating these giants was incredibly difficult legally, too.
Very difficult. There was the deep-seated American belief in free enterprise, the American dream idea that anyone could become rich.
And corporations found a powerful legal shield.
Yes, in a really ironic twist of history, lawyers started using the 14th Amendment.
Which was passed after the Civil War, primarily to protect the rights of formerly enslaved people.
Right. But corporate lawyers argued that a corporation was a legal person. Therefore, under the 14th Amendment, states couldn't deprive them of their property, meaning profits or control, without due process of law.
So an amendment meant for civil rights became a shield for corporations against state regulation.
It was used that way successfully for decades. It made state-level regulation almost impossible.
Which again points back to the need for federal action.
And that led to the Sherman Anti-Trust Act of 1890.
What did it do? Or try to do?
It forbade combinations in restraint of trade. Basically, it outlawed monopolies and trusts that stifled competition. The principle was supposed to be that bigness itself wasn't illegal, but bad bigness monopolies that hurt consumers was.
But it didn't work very well initially, did it?
No, it was full of legal loopholes. For over a decade, it was pretty ineffective against industrial trusts.
And it got turned against.
Ironically, against labor unions. Courts ruled that strikes and boycotts were combinations in restraint of trade, so the act was used more effectively to curb organized labor than corporate monopolies in its early years.
So the legal system was really struggling to adapt to this new industrial reality.
Absolutely. The scale and power of corporations were just overwhelming existing laws and structures.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. While the North is industrializing at this frantic pace, what's happening in the South?
The South is largely left behind. It remains overwhelmingly rural, agricultural.
Still recovering from the Civil War?
Deeply. The economy is dominated by sharecropping and tenant farming, which often kept both black and poor white farmers in cycles of debt.
But wasn't there a push for a new South industrialization?
There was. Figures like Henry W. Grady, an Atlanta newspaper editor, were prominent boosters, calling for the South to industrialize, to become more like the North economically.
Did it happen?
Only in very limited ways. There were significant obstacles.
Like what?
One big one was the railroad rate system, which was dominated by Northern interests. They set discriminatory freight rates.
How did that work?
Take steel, for example. Birmingham, Alabama, had great deposits of coal and iron ore right nearby. It should have been a major steel center. But the railroads charged Birmingham steel producers a higher freight rate, essentially adding a fictional fee as if the steel had been shipped from Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Plus pricing system.
To protect northern steel mills from southern competition.
Exactly. Basically choked off Birmingham's potential to compete nationally. An economic straitjacket imposed from outside.
So where did the South see some industrial growth?
Primarily in cotton textiles. Mills started moving from New England down to the Carolinas and Georgia.
Why?
Tax breaks from southern states desperate for investment and especially cheap labor.
Who worked in these mills?
Mostly poor white Southerners, often entire families. It was low-wage work, often in company towns where workers were paid in credit.
Usable only at the high-priced company store, keeping them perpetually in debt.
Right. And crucially, the labor force was non-unionized. That was a major draw for the mill owners.
This really highlights the vulnerability of the individual worker in this new industrial age.
Absolutely. It's a whole new world for labor. Work becomes depersonalized. You're not an apprentice working alongside the master craftsman anymore.
You're a tiny cog in a giant, impersonal factory system.
Right. And often, new machines are de-skilling labor, meaning skilled artisans find their craft is obsolete, replaced by a machine operator who is easily replaceable.
And workers are totally dependent on wages, vulnerable to layoffs during economic downturns, which were frequent.
Completely vulnerable. And employers had a whole arsenal of tactics to fight unions and keep wages low.
What kind of tactics?
They could get court injunctions ordering strikers back to work. They could use lockouts to shut down the factory to starve workers into submission.
They made workers sign yellow dog contracts?
Yes, contracts where workers pledged not to join a union as a condition of employment.
And blacklists.
Circulating names of union organizers among employers to prevent them from getting hired anywhere. The individual worker had almost no power against the corporation.
Which, logically, leads to workers trying to organize collectively, the rise of unions.
Exactly. Necessity is the mother of invention and organization. The first major national effort was the National Labor Union, formed in 1866.
What were they aiming for?
Pretty ambitious. They tried to unite skilled workers, unskilled workers, farmers. They pushed for things like the 8-hour workday.
But they excluded some groups.
Yes, they largely excluded Chinese workers, reflecting the racism of the time. And they didn't last very long, collapsing in the 1870s.
Then came the Knights of Labor, starting in 1869.
Right, led by Terence V. Powderly. The Knights were even more ambitious, more idealistic.
Their slogan was one big union.
Pretty much. They welcomed skilled and unskilled, men and women, whites and blacks, a remarkable level of inclusion for the era.
Though they also barred Chinese immigrants.
Unfortunately, yes. Their ultimate goal wasn't just better wages. It was a fundamental change in society. A cooperative commonwealth, where workers would eventually own the factories. Very utopian.
They grew rapidly for a while. What happened?
Their downfall was linked, unfairly, to the Haymarket Square bombing in Chicago in 1886.
What was that?
Labor demonstration turned violent when someone threw a bomb at police, killing several. Anarchists were blamed, and because the Knights were large and somewhat associated with radical ideas,
They got painted with the same brush.
exactly. Public opinion turned sharply against them. They were associated with violence and anarchism, even though they weren't directly involved. Their membership plummeted.
So the failure of these broad idealistic unions led to a different approach.
Yes, a more pragmatic, focused approach. This led directly to the formation of the American Federation of Labor, the AFL, in 1886.
Founded by Samuel Gompers.
Right. Gompers was a former cigar maker, very practical. He basically gave up on the utopian one big union idea.
What was his strategy?
He focused only on organizing skilled craft workers, carpenters, bricklayers, plumbers, etc.,
Why only skilled workers?
because they had more bargaining power. They were harder for employers to replace than unskilled laborers.
And what were their goals? Pure and simple unionism.
That's the term. Gompers wasn't trying to overthrow capitalism. He famously said the AFL had no quarrel with capitalism.
Yeah, I just want it.
More. Better wages, shorter hours, safer working conditions, the closed shop, meaning workplaces that only hired union members. concrete, achievable gains within the existing system.
But this meant excluding a lot of people.
It did. The AFL deliberately excluded most unskilled workers, most women, and almost all African Americans. Gompers focused narrowly on the economic betterment of his skilled, mostly white male members.
So by 1900, where did organized labor stand?
Still pretty small
Yeah.
overall. Union members made up only about 3% of the total workforce. But the tide was slowly turning. The public was beginning, grudgingly, to concede that workers probably did have a right to organize and bargain collectively. The struggles were far from over, but the principle was starting to gain ground.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together. Looking back at 1865 to 1900.
It's just a period of staggering, rapid economic transformation. Unprecedented.
Driven by railroads connecting the nation, breakthroughs in steel and technology, and this massive consolidation of capital by figures like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Morgan.
The titans, yeah.
Yeah.
Creating these huge corporations and trusts.
And that created enormous wealth, but also huge tension, right? Between that concentrated wealth and the vulnerability of the individual wage earner.
Absolutely. That's the central conflict. And alongside it, the struggle of the government and society to adapt.
Trying to balance that traditional American ideal of laissez-faire, minimal government,
with the undeniable reality that these new industrial giants needed some kind of regulation, leading to those first, often clumsy federal attempts like the ICC and the Sherman Act.
it feels like America was forced to scale up its institutions to match the new scale of its economy.
It was. And that leads to a really fundamental question, maybe the lasting legacy of this era.
What's that?
Think about it. America was founded, in many ways, on a deep suspicion of big, powerful institutions, monarchies, established churches, centralized government, individual liberty, local control. That was the ideal.
But this period sees the sudden rise of these massive private institutions, corporate trusts, railroad empires, huge banks, monolithic entities.
Exactly. And the response, eventually, is often bigger government trying to regulate them. So the provocative thought is this. Can those original American ideals of individual autonomy and freedom truly survive in a civilization dominated by such vast, powerful organizations, whether they're corporate or governmental?
That's a heavy question. It seems like the struggle that began in the Gilded Age, balancing individual liberty with the power of large institutions, is one we're still grappling with today.
I think that's absolutely right. It shaped the century that followed, and it continues to shape our debates right now.